What's up, people? It's been a minute. I put this little thing together. Took a lot of notes on it. It's about democide and genocide that's happened in the last 100 years, all due to people's belief in government policy, and it's pretty alarming and disgusting. And I'm hoping that to put together like a little 2 or 3 part series, like this will be the past, and I'll do a present, and then like the idea of what the future will look like if people don't start changing their ways. People that you've elected to protect and guide and represent you are predators. Over 260 people have been murdered by government. 260 million innocent people shot, mutilated, starved, worked to death, bayoneted, hung, all by elected officials who were sworn to protect and serve us. These people had no means to defend themselves because of their belief in government and their compliance, their willingness to shut off their brains and do as they are told, and hand in their weapons for what they believed would create a better world for them to live in. Here goes Turkey, 1915. During World War I, a new ruling class has taken over the Ottoman Empire. They say they want to rid the country of wrong and lawless ideas, all in the name of national security. Sound familiar? 9/11. These are fast burns, though, because back then they didn't have, I guess, they burned so fast because back then they didn't have the internet, and, you know what I mean? They could just move a lot faster because people wasn't onto their shit. All in the name of national security. So they single out the Armenians. They want the Armenians gone. They want them eliminated from Turkey. The Muslim leaders over there decided they were going to eliminate largely Christian minority of Armenians, stating that since the collective society is in danger, they must all be killed, men, women, and children, without discrimination. But because they'd be faced with opposition, they did it sneakily. First, they drafted as many Armenians as they could into the army, conscription to war. Then they separated Armenian soldiers from their units and sent them to labor camps, worked them to death, starved them, dehydrated them, used them, abused them, and let them fucking die. They even murdered large groups of them far from the public eye. But there were still hell Armenians left, so their next step was to confiscate weapons from all the Armenians. They made it illegal for Armenians to possess weapons. They imposed stiff penalties, fines, and imprisonment for possessing the weapons. Created a national registry for weapons. I'm sorry I lost my place. Then they go house to house ransacking shit and torture motherfuckers to get them weapons. And it with this registry shit, you see these jokes, people are like, oh, I lost mine in a boating accident. I'll just bury him or whatever. And I'll tell them all, you know, if they ever come for your weapons, you better have them ready to rock and roll, because if they come for them and you don't have them and they know that you had them, it's not going to go well, because now you done hit them and they know you had them. So they're going to torture you and murder you. But anyway, it got so bad over there that Armenians would actually buy guns from the Turks just so they would have something to hand in so they wouldn't be tortured by the ruling class. And then after that, they say that all Armenians must be removed from Turkey, and they got to go to these fucking collectivized camps and farms. And they had 5 days to get ready. They may bring only what they can carry. Armed guards get them all up. And since they had already slaughtered all the men, basically all that was left was women, children, old, and sick. So they marched all these Armenians the old women, children, and sick out to the desert in the middle of summer, and a lot of them died on the way. Guards killed them. In the end, it was over 500,000 people they killed. All in the name of national security, and you can't go over all of this without pointing out the fact that there's no way that the government could have ever done such a thing without the support of the majority of the people who lived under this rule. You know you can't find much about it during 1915-17 during this time, but I'm certain there was a hate and smear campaign against Armenians about how dangerous and how they're animals and this and that. It's super scary. So fast forward a little bit further to the Soviet Union in the late 1920s, early 1930s, when the communists came to power over there in the Soviet Union, 1917. They devised a plan to manufacture a famine, and it fucking works. Pay attention, because that's what's about to happen here. Straight off the top, they created laws that made it nearly impossible for non-party members to own firearms. They created a registry and licensing laws a lot similar to here in America. And that way you know exactly who had what guns. You got caught with guns you wasn't supposed to have, you could be forced into a labor camp. Stalin out there going wild in the Ukraine. Super paranoid dude. So this psycho decrees that all farmland, produce, and livestock belong to the state. So all these property owners and farmers that was out there, they got cattle and produce and farming and all that. They had to hand it all over to this dude. And then moved to state-ran collectivized farms. So he took all their shit and then moved them into these weird collectivized farms. Then during all this, just to scare the shit out of everybody as to not have any opposition from the people, he took all the top farmers and put them in more collectivized camps, and then killed a bunch of them straight out in the open. And then the ones that he puts in collective life cards, he puts quotas on them. Impossible quotas enforced by his government thugs. It was so ridiculous that these farmers actually revolted. But after 10 years of firearm confiscation, there wasn't much for them to fight with. Like, all they had was pitchforks and fucking hoes and farm weapons and shit. So it didn't go well. Let's not forget that these collectivized farmers, they ran in the millions. There was millions of them. And they revolted with their little farm tools. It didn't work out. But now Stalin controls all the food production, the cattle, produce, all of it. And to get his revenge, he just purposely starved these motherfuckers out. People didn't want to believe it, but the government, they hate you. He had troops and secret police watching these people day and night, and, you know, they would harvest these fields that they made these dudes fucking farm, and if they saw anybody keeping anything for themselves, they'd fucking kill them. And I've seen some of the propaganda against these farmers back then. It was real bad. So, like, they were starving so bad that they resulted to cannibalism. And there's propagandas about them eating their babies and shit, but which is horrible. I could never do that. But they were forced into this crazy situation. And the media, of course, just like today, hides it. Hides the fact that, you know, this situation was manufactured. Makes them all out to be animals. Doesn't let on that this is a purposeful famine. And in fact, the United States propped him up to be some type of good guy. So he upped the grain export from his country because he had a lot left from starving all these motherfuckers to death. So in the end, he starved out at least 10 million people. It was a purposeful and political man-made famine. In China, from the 1930s to 1970s, we all know how fucked up China is. It's all about obedience over there. I mean, if we really knew what was even going on over there today, who fucking knows? And the media covers all that shit up too. So back then, it was a big fight between commie rulers and nationalist rulers. Nationalists end up winning, and as soon as they do, they put out that gun ban. And straight after the gun ban, just in the span of a couple years, 4 million people starved to death under another purposeful political starvation program because the government was out there confiscating people's crops. So then apparently, China got into it with Japan, and all the fucking people that didn't want to be drafted into the army and refused it, probably because they didn't want to fight for a government that just fucking starved out millions of people purposely, they snatched them up and tortured them and murdered them. Most of them shot, some of them starved to death in camps. So there goes about another 4 million people dead. And then after the Chinese government killed 8 million people, while in the middle of this situation with the Japanese invaded. This is about like 1940. It's about 250,000 Japanese go over there, and Chinese soldiers retreat and surrender, leaving behind all the civilians who have no weapons because the Chinese nationalists stole all their shit. Now, how do you think that went? Then these sick Japanese fucks rape, torture, murder, bury alive, use them for bayonet practice, cut their organs out while they're still alive. Real nasty shit. And for about a month, this shit went on for about a month. And they couldn't do anything because the government took all their weapons. So then, the commies take back over. And it's probably because all these people that got starved to death and got their weapons took over, they're like, well, fucking, the nationalists fucked us over, let's do the communist thing. Like over here, blue and red, left and right, donkey cult, elephant cult. And straight off the top, they killed millions of people. The commies do their own gun thing. Right down so you can't even have guns to hunt. All of it. They outlawed them. Gone. Every citizen was used as a tool of the government. All, or an enemy of the state. So basically, fucking slavery. But it wasn't that covert in nature. It was very out in the open and brutal. Over about 35 years through this crazy authoritarian situation. More starvation and flat out murders because everybody was an enemy of the state. They killed another 35 or 40 million people. Now had all the guns and all the guns left over from the national takeover. And then he got the rest. So yeah, they want your guns and they're gonna fuck up your food and they control you with propaganda. There goes Germany. Hitler comes in 1933. Starts a gun registration act, or because of a gun registration act that was implemented 5 years earlier. As soon as he got into power, he already knew where all them guns was. So he immediately took guns from the political opposition. But people can still apply for gun licenses. But then he passes along, gun licenses won't be granted to Jews. In the same year, in what they call the Night of the Broken Glass, because of propaganda Minister Grobel, government agents doing an all-out assault on Jews across the whole nation. They fuck up their stores, looting property, burning their synagogues, and even committing murder. And the next day, they make a law saying Jews can have no weapons, no guns, no knives, no clubs, no nothing. Any Jew caught with any of that shit could get 5 years in a concentration camps that was already set up. So all these Jews turning in their weapons out of fear, while Nazis run them up, kicking in doors, doing Nazi shit, because they don't have any weapons. They've been, again, rendered completely defenseless. There ain't nothing to do but wait and get slaughtered. And the Nazis, they went through their census data and all that, and they start targeting Jews because of the propaganda that had been administered for God knows how many years. The public accepted this shit. And in a matter of days, they rounded up about 90,000 Jewish men. And they start with the men, obviously, because the men are the ones that'll fight back. So then Hitler starts trying to conquer Europe. Gets a lot of resistance all over Europe, but not in Germany. This dude snatched up 3 million political dissidents and put them in concentration camps. So now you're already up to about 3.5 million people dead. Locked up in camp and God knows what else. Say between 1933 and 1940, over 5 million Jews are slaughtered, a million children slaughtered, Gypsies, Slavic, pacifists, hell, even disabled. And of course, the rest of the people, you know, openly showed their distaste for the heinous shit that was going on. So now he's up closer to about 10 million. And it wasn't just Germany, it was all over Europe. So the numbers add closer up to about 21 million. Cambodia. So this goes on in the mid-1970s, but prior to this, Cambodia was under French rule for about 90 years. It was already super fucked up, and then they have a 5-year civil war where communists took over. Not to say things were great when the French controlled the whole place, but it was about to get a lot worse. This fucking horror show in Pol Pot, his whole stick was, we're going to purify the nation. So they started with the religious leaders, slaughtering monks, preachers, priests, nuns, you name it. Political opposition, people that lived in cities, dissidents, people from undesirable race and backgrounds. The mayor advocated for all traces of Western culture and capitalism, all students and intellectuals, anyone who can speak English or French or has over a 7th grade education. Even wearing glasses could get you clipped back then. And it all worked out really well because even before the communists took over, they had strict gun laws, especially on how many guns people could own. I guess there was a pretty high monk population over there, and that combined with all the religious stuff and not having any weapons, you already had a pretty docile culture. So he orders mass evacuations from the city, stating that it'll only be temporary. So these fools are unarmed, not knowing what's going on, actually believing the government has something good going for them. They don't even take enough food, like, for the journey. He marches them into collective farms without housing, without personal possessions, and even split them up from their families. You know, just the people that haven't been killed yet. The whole fucking state's a concentration camp. You couldn't get mail, no phone calls, nothing. He just turned this whole place into a prison. And crazily enough, the Vietnamese invaded Cambodia, and it took them about a month to shut old Pol Pot down. But not before he could slaughter about 2 million people. In Uganda in the 1970s, Idi Amin. Political leaders all over the world embraced the psycho. Amin overthrew a dictator, Milton Obote, who was not as crazy as Armini, but so bold that he banned political parties, killed opponents, implemented a socialist agenda, and on top of all that, they had laws in place to prevent regular people from having firearms. So you would think yourself, who could be worse? But yeah, here comes Idi Armini getting way worse. First thing he does straight off the top is he fucking murders all the soldiers who he has doubts about their loyalty. Ended up being about 15,000 of them. Then the nut job says God told him to do all this shit, and now he wants to throw out all the Asian and the English people. He took all their possessions, all their businesses, so naturally Uganda goes into shit hits the fan mode. Then to further prevent resistance, he makes it illegal for more than 3 people to gather. That kind of sounds like a COVID lockdown. So then him and his special police run amok, seizing what's left of the weapons, torturing and terrorizing Christians and people from rivaling tribes, and just people who the soldiers came across that they happen to not like. This shit went on for 8 years. And finally, dude was overthrown. Saudi Arabia gives him sanctuary as a guest, and he was never charged with any crimes. He killed almost 1 million people. Rwanda, 100-day genocide. So this whole place is ran by 2 tribes. About 90% of the population is one tribe and 10% of the other tribe. The government gives power to the smallest tribe. And when the larger tribe threatens to rebel, they turn on this crazy propaganda machine, declare them all rebels. So this is just all about propaganda, and the government issued weapons to gangs. They didn't have a lot of firearms, so they used crazy shit like baseball bats with nails in them, axes, blunt instruments. And over there, they required a permit for firearms. And because they were like the outcasts of society, none of them actually would be granted firearms licenses. So they would like stockpile rocks. In one situation, about 6,000 people huddled into a massive church, and all they had was some rocks and shit that they fashioned to fight off these people. Bow and arrows and guns that they got from dead soldiers, and they held waves and waves of soldiers off for about a week, but eventually they were overran and killed by grenades. Another situation, a mayor of this town, he asks people to disarm and tells them that the police will protect them. But they wouldn't turn their weapons in because they didn't trust them, so then he told the police to kill them. And it took them about 3 days, and they killed about 20,000 people. So all over the place, people are hiding in schools and churches, and they know these people are hunting them. So his fucking crews just go door to door, kicking in shit and slaughtering small groups of people, large groups of people. They set up roadblocks. They're checking everybody's ID. And anybody that had an ID card that was from that smaller tribe just straight up got killed. Didn't matter if it was a man, woman, or child. And they just killed you because the government had branded this whole group of people rebels just because they weren't part of the group that they wanted to empower. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not very good at this, but you get the fucking point. So a precursor to all of these situations is starvation, famines, lots of propaganda against certain groups of people, food shortages. And, I mean, fuck, dude, that's some fucking nasty shit going on out there. So, I would prepare yourself for the worst, because the things that have been happening here just for the last 2 years alone should raise a lot of red flags. Just after this brief little history lesson, don't give up your shit. Stock up some food, and I wouldn't be entirely trusting of the ruling class, especially with what's going on now. You got this Russia-Ukraine thing going on where, they're two of the largest grain exports in the world. Well, that all just pretty much came to a stop because of their fucking war. Just in the last 6 months or so, I believe like 20 something food manufacturing plants have been burned down, exploded. A couple even have airplanes crash into them here in America. Energy costs are through the roof. One of the biggest fertilizer plants in Europe shut down. They sell ammonium nitrate or something that goes to all these major farms that helps protect and boost the yield of crops. So that price was already up. Well, now they ain't producing, so people, they ain't gonna be getting that. Midwest grain farms have been flooded year after year after year in the spring. California droughts, shipping problems. Shanghai's on lockdown. You got fucking mad ships and ports backed up from there all the way to California. There's a bucking. They say there's a bird flu going on, so they're slaughtering all these chickens and turkeys and shit. It's scary stuff. So it's like, of my opinion, that I feel like they won't do all that crazy overt bullshit like they did 50 or 100 years ago, at least not here in America. They will and are creating a food crisis, and will kind of let us all kill each other, starve out to death, then come in and pick the bones. Because you can kind of tell already, because everything that's going on, they blame it on COVID lockdowns, this new war. I feel like it's going to come faster than everybody's prepared for. I'm not completely prepared, not even really remotely prepared. I am, like, mentally and spiritually, but not financially, physically, and materialistically. So work on them things. Save yourself. Pay attention to what's going on. God help us all, man.